Welcome to Drinks in the Library, the only library where drinks aren't just allowed, they are required. I'm your librarian host, Gigi Howard, and each episode I'll be interviewing a guest about a much-loved book that we will be pairing with a drink for you to enjoy along with us or consider for your next book club meetup. As always, stay curious and support your local library. Hello, Libration Nation. This week, we are discussing The Big Leap, Conquer Your Hidden Fear and Take Life to the Next Level by Hendricks. This book encourages readers to go beyond their internal limits, release outdated fears, and learn a whole new set of powerful skills and habits to liberate authentic greatness. I am joined this week with author Nancy Houser-Bluhm. Nancy lived in the foothills of Denver, Colorado for over 25 years with her husband and a menagerie of pets. She had hailed from Michigan, but growing up watching Bonanza led her to a longing to go west. They have since journeyed back to Michigan, and years of rock climbing and skiing have shifted to biking and skiing, yoga, breathing in nature, and daily doses of writing with a variety of groups. Her most recent novel, The Nickel Loop, was released July 22nd, 2024. In The Nickel Loop, one of the main characters is drinking the classic Four Roses bourbon. So Nancy and I sipped on that while we were talking. I hope you enjoyed this episode. So glad you can join me tonight, Nancy, all the way from Michigan. How is the weather up there?
It's very chilly, and we're under some winter storm warning, but it's, the sun's been shining more, and so I'm just, I'm ecstatic for sunshine. I'll take just about any temperature and condition the sun can shine.
Okay, yeah. Well, wonderful. Well, I'm so glad that we're here to talk tonight about one of your favorite books, The Big Leap. It's the subtitle of it is Conquer Your Fear and Take Your Life to the Next Level, and it's by Hendricks. So I guess my first question I always ask is, who were you when you picked up this book?
I think I've been more than one person or an evolving person, because I've read it now 3 times. The first time it was just handed to me by a friend, and I read it and I was like, oh, this means a lot to me. The upper limit thing, I was someone that really felt like if I stood out in a crowd or shined or something too bright, that, that was a sign of arrogance, or that was a sign I was supposed to be this supporter person. And so that kind of spoke to me then. And then while I was writing my first novel, Whispers for Tara, I read it again and really dived into the fear factor and what Hendricks talks about, that terror will rise up when you're getting to that upper limit and things are going good and you're feeling good and you're starting to hit that upper limit, that your subconscious or your ego or whatever does something to try to keep you back, and it, your brain just generates all these horrible possible scenarios of what could happen if you get to your upper limit, if you break through it. So there's, that was definitely very instrumental for me when I was writing my first novel. And then I actually spent some time in a study group with it some months later after the book released, and I just feel like it's one of those books that you can deepen and kind of dig around and find new meaning in, because it's just that much good information.
So the upper limit problem Hendricks talks about is, when you start to, basically you start to fly, or you're thinking about flying, and then first thing you think about is failure. Mm-hmm. So what are some of the ways that would manifest for you?
I think the issues were, certainly most new authors have the imposter syndrome, lots of people do with whatever they're breaking into. And so, that can definitely knock you back a loop when you start into that dialogue about, your value and your credibility and that type of thing. But during the writing of the book, it was really raising up more fear that I that something I wrote would be, because some of it had, I quoted some things, some of it would be, somebody would discover that I'd quoted too long and, want to sue me, or they would say that I didn't get the right release of information, for being able to use something. Because I talk about I do write, even though it's a fiction book, I do write in some real companies and that type of thing. So there was just a lot of probably whatever a person has that holds them back rises up during that time. And for me, it is probably fear factors start rising up. And then once I published the book, then it was really feeling comfortable stepping out. Like the first time I did a book signing where I did a reading, it was very hard for me to have a group of people of 12 or 13 people sitting there listening to me. And so that was just more things that I had to work through. And I just call it kind of navigating through the fear, because I learned to do that, to not let that knock me back down.
Were there different strategies or things that you told yourself at the time
I love mantras.
Okay.
And I love affirmations. And so, I had one mantra that really helped me at the very end, just before the actual release of the first book. And it was something to do with, my book is good. I have a right to write this. People enjoy it, and I'm safe. And the safety, that feeling like, because if you think that the ego wants to remain safe and wants predictability and that type of thing, I just had to reassure my ego or subconscious or whatever you want to call it, that I was still safe and that they were safe. All my little entities in me are safe. And that really made a difference for me. And then I also had just good friends, that would help kind of walk me back off, the ledge, and reassure me that, the people who had beta read the book, the value that it had, the person who did the proofreading, things she had to say about it, and that was helpful too.
Yeah. So going into your writing a little bit, so you're writing your first book and you're thinking of all these, you've got all these things in the back of your mind kind of flowing through you. But what was that story about that, you had to get on paper?
That story was Whispers for Tara, and it had an environmental thread through it. The main character, Mary, is a speech pathologist, which was my background, and that made that portion of it easy to write. But the premise of it was that she spent a lot of time in the woods, and that the woods started to speak out to her and ask her to carry a message to the earth. And it was about her finding her own voice to go big with something like that, and the community she builds and she finds throughout that to help carry her through and help her really, they went on this path together instead of her going on it alone. And it had a strong thread about the power of friendship and community. And the earth was a big message from it too, or soil specifically.
Okay.
And I really feel I like to write and include something, some element of the earth and things we should tend to, something to do with our culture or earth, that type of thing.
Okay. And so you had your background as a speech pathologist. When did you start thinking that you wanted to write?
I always liked writing. I've always journaled, and I had written articles about journaling, and I always would write short vignettes, like a local newspaper would put out a prompt spring, something like that. And you write some, and if they got selected, they would publish your article, your piece. And so I've done many of those, and I just always really enjoyed writing. And then once I retired from speech pathology, I wasn't really sure. I was going to work a little bit part-time, but I wasn't sure how I would spend my time. And when I went to the retirement party, they were like, "What are you going to do now?" And I said, "Well, I want to keep writing. I just don't know what it will look like." And I started a blog, and I thought that was going to be it. And then I found myself in this group of people that you write a book, you write a first draft in 90 days. And so it was a community on just Zoom led by a person named Sage Adderley, and she kind of just mentored us to keep us. It wasn't so much about our writing, at least not for me. It was more about the pacing, keeping yourself focused and organized, and sitting down whatever time frame, number of times a week you said you were going to. And that really got me across the finish line, being able to do that. I didn't retire thinking I'd write a novel. I thought I would be a famous blogger or something like that. I didn't think that it would be writing a novel, and so that was kind of a surprise to me. And I always thought I couldn't write dialogue, and actually dialogue came quite easily in it. So
very cool. Good. Well, and good job pushing through. I think I can't write it. I mean, who told you that you couldn't write dialogue?
Good question. I don't think I think because I don't flow in storytelling. Like some people can just, make up stories, or they can just, and I don't flow in that. So I just presumed I could never do that. I didn't know how to do it, but that was something that several people commented that they thought I did really well, in that first novel, was that the dialogue was very natural and believable and good. So
awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. And like you're saying, like coming back to the book a little bit, and it sounds to me, and you can say I'm wrong, but we are told things like you can't do this, or you're not good at this naturally. And it sounds like yours was something along the life of along feeling unsafe. Is that correct?
I think at first it really was more that wasn't right necessarily to do things that took you out of that helper mode. And I don't, I think back, and I'm not sure how when we grow up we filter things, and our siblings might feel they learned something completely different or heard it completely differently. And I think for whatever reason I filtered it that I shouldn't shine too bright or be, and maybe it was my upbringing. I grew up Catholic. Maybe it had something to do with that. Women were very much in the supporter role then, and more so than they are today. It was more the expectation. But I think I was always raised with somewhat of a fear of, I don't know, like going too far away, going to this, to that. And so fear probably was an overriding factor for me. And, years ago, I had a kind of mentor who told me that, there's never been a good decision made that came from fear, that was based out of fear. And so I try to pay attention. I think I've, come a long ways with that. I think the one part in The Big Leap that's intriguing to me is that very often when things are going very well for us, whether or not it's fear or whatever it is, when things are going very well for us, that our subconscious has this way of raising things up, whether it's negative thoughts about this or we have, in the book he cites, you go home and you have an argument with your spouse or something like that, because there's just something that when we get too close to that upper limit place we want to be, that there's something in us that wants to pull us back down. And it's not like evil intent. I think it's almost like a protective mechanism, maybe, is what he's implying. And I think that's very interesting, because I have people I know that I do think that when things are too good, they do something. Something happens that brings them back into kind of a more down place.
Yeah, like a self-sabotage moment.
Yes, exactly. Thank you. Perfect.
Yeah. And I was thinking, maybe you'll remember this part of the book a little bit better than I did, but he talks about getting into a fight or getting into an argument with someone and like kind of the pointlessness of that. And I remember he said specifically, if someone is poking you and poking you and poking you, you should say, stop poking me or stop bothering me. It's something along those lines. But actually, a lot of the times these big arguments that people get into that cause such big rifts in relationships are absolutely really pointless and are like a form of self-sabotage.
True. Yeah, I don't, that's interesting because I don't remember, really can't say I remember that part specifically, but I think in life that's so true. And that's what arguments, they go off on this thread that has nothing to do with what they really want to talk about. And the argument comes out of that, or it's a distraction, from what really needs to be addressed. And I think once I did learn that lesson a long time ago, just given that, I'm this age, I learned that to really, when I'm arguing something, to stick with what is being argued and to, I'll say, call out myself if I go into a subgenre, that really doesn't apply to this discussion, or if the other person does. Because it can be very tricky, especially, you're right, if they know your triggers.
Yeah.
And can use some of those words, that type of thing. And so you have to know your own triggers for one thing, and know that, and some people will argue for the sake of winning, but if it's an argument to try to really resolve and make something better, then you really want to make sure you're not just doing the poking. I like that word. So, yeah.
Yeah, stick to the facts. I mean, it can get just blown so far out of proportion.
Yes.
And another thing that struck me when reading it is, the reason I asked earlier, I guess, lack of a better word, is like your personal brand of fear or doubt, is I think that knowing what that is to you, because it is a personal thing, is
Right.
so important, because then you can recognize it when it comes out. I know my personal thing that I will say to myself is that I'm inadequate, that something about me is wrong, and I need to look to someone else's viewpoint, because mine can't possibly be right. And so now I'm not constantly, but I'm working towards recognizing it when that
Right.
happens, as I try to reach my upper limit, I guess.
Yes. And isn't that, half the battle, that if you can catch yourself faster and faster and faster in it, then, you're on the path to better resolving it. And when it does come up, you're seeing it from a whole different perspective. You probably may have read the book. It's popular again, actually, The Artist Way by Julia Cameron.
No, I haven't
read that. It's about it for creatives, just in general, and trying to create stimulate the creative juices in people. But one of the theories in it, the front of it is a mountain, and her statement from it was that when you think you're dealing with the same thing over and over, so yes, I'm dealing with fear or whatever, but as you're winding up the mountain, when you're hiking, you're viewing the same trees or whatever below you, but you're seeing it from a different perspective, a higher plane. And that's what I think we do when we learn to catch ourselves and stop whatever the negative thought is. So that's another book that had influence. That had to be from, I think, maybe the 90s.
Okay.
But there were, on TikTok, there were some young people talking about, how good that book was. And I was like, I know that book.
Very well. I mean, if the idea is it doesn't matter when it came out,
No,
it
it
still
doesn't. No,
speaks to us. Yeah. What are some other things that were in The Big Leap that spoke to you, or that you think that listeners might, it might draw them in a little bit?
The different zones, and I have to even refresh my memory, because the zone of genius is what we're all supposed to get to. And I'm not sure. I think I know what my zone of genius is. I've just never figured out. I kind of live it, but did not become a career or anything like that. But below the zone of genius is where you love that aspect of a job or a life so much that you can lose track of time, or you don't feel like you're working. It's the kind where you love your job so much or your purpose. And below that is the zone of excellence, and below that's the zone of competence, I believe. And so there's different levels, and that, he claims, like with zone of excellence, you can be doing a job very, very well, but it doesn't necessarily give you that zone of genius feeling where you can be very successful at it, but it's still not necessarily what you're meant to be doing. But I felt as a speech pathologist, I was very happy in my zone of excellence as a speech pathologist. But then the zone of competence is where, yeah, you can do that job, but you're not necessarily that good at it. You do it, it'd be like me trying, to figure out technology or something like that. That's a job you should just hire out, or I should just get one of my nieces or nephews to do for me or something, some of the details of it. And so that's the zone of competence. And many people spend too much time in the zone of competence where, yes, you can do it, but it's not necessarily what you're best at. But sometimes we get stuck in those kind of roles. And for me, my interpretation is at least we should all be in our zone of excellence where we do something so well and we enjoy doing it.
Very cool. And then talking a little bit, let's talk about the book, about your book.
Okay.
And so we are drinking Four Roses Kentucky bourbon. Yep. And you suggested this because of the main character in your book, the Nickel Loop, correct?
Right, yes. So the Nickel Loop is a time travel, romance, fiction, historical fiction. It takes place in 1938 primarily, and the two main characters are a woman from 2022 traveling from Denver to Glenwood Springs in Colorado, gets off the train and realizes eventually that she's in the year 1938, that she's time traveled back. Nicholas, the main male character, also time traveled to 1938, but he moved forward from 1898. And so they're trying to navigate living. First, they're trying to navigate how to get out of 1938 and get back to their own times. And then Nicholas, who's really quite forward-thinking, really finds out that he's actually kind of likes being 40 years in the future. He likes all the advancements and that sort of thing, while Emmeline is still trying to get back to 2022. But in 1930s, one of the main alcohols was Four Roses. And so in a scene, they're sitting in the Brown Palace in Denver having a drink, and he's drinking Four Roses on the rocks. So that's why we're drinking it today.
Love it. And I'm drinking mine on the rocks.
Mine is with kombucha.
Oh, okay. So healthy.
Healthy, not healthy.
They cancel each other out.
That's right. Exactly. And it's quite good.
So talking about, the big leap and writing, what are some things that you would say to yourself looking back, like right when you started thinking about writing, that you know now that you wish you had known then?
That people will like the stories that I write. I have a right to sit down and write whatever I want to write. I can choose to write to the tropes and and follow all the rules, or I can go off the rails if I want to. I just have to be willing to know the consequences, that if I don't follow some of the rules of writing as far as the character arcs and that type of thing, but that it's okay however your book lands. If you feel like you put out a good product, you're going to have your fans, you're going to have your believers, and you have a right to be out there in the cosmos with all your ideas, and in the bookstores and on Amazon, and that everything really is okay. And I wish I could have relaxed and enjoyed that process more, which I did by the second book. I'd worked through so much of that, and you're still nervous when it comes down to like release day, because you want it to be well received. You want people to love it. And I was on a Zoom call with some other writers that are quite successful, and they still have the inner critic. I have a partial blog written about stop sleeping with your inner critic, because it's always in the middle of the night, that those sort of thoughts come up about, oh, but that person's a better writer, or they've got more reviews, or whatever it is. And I learned a lot of things from the first book to the second book. And to find your tribe, I think, is such a big thing. Because if you have people, it was hard with my second book, actually, to, thank everybody. I felt like I was standing up at the Oscars or something as I was writing the acknowledgement page in the book, because they were going to start pulling me off the stage or something, because there were so many people that just really kind of rallied around and still were excited about it, even though it had been 3 years since my last book. And there were people that would read, like ARC readers, that would send parts of quotes, and just love this part, and things that just really make you soar when you get to read them. And so if you can find your tribe and people that just really support you, it's a marvelous feeling, and it's so much easier to go to release day. A healthy and sane person.
What are some ways that you found your tribe? I mean, through writing groups?
Yeah, the writing groups are so supportive, so supportive. And if they're not, then you shouldn't be in that writing group. But, I have some good friends, they weren't necessarily the ones that I expected to just be so present for me. And, they've continued to be champions for me. And at first you're kind of like, oh, that's so nice. And you feel like, oh, don't do that. And then you're like, oh, thank you. I just really needed to talk to you today, because I needed somebody to say, this is good, this is right, go ahead. And so it was friendships, it was writers groups, retreat groups, and then there's people that I was surprised by that read it after the fact. People that I didn't ever expect to enjoy my book. And sometimes the people that I hoped would like my book never really said anything. They just they don't ghost you in general, but it's just this elephant in the room. And so I've gotten braver about just say, I don't care,
Yeah.
I have a stronger author ego now. I can hear that you didn't think this was realistic, or, you don't like time travel, or whatever it is.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's so interesting, like going back to like your inner critic, and not necessarily that, you think this person will show up in a certain way and they don't, like that's fine or whatever. But it's always so surprising, the people that do show up. And it's really like amazing. I mean, to have people you never would have thought being in your corner,
right,
and they're fighting for you.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Because the first book, my husband, bless his heart, I never knew he felt this way until it was after the book was out, and he was talking. I was sitting there, but he was talking to a friend, and he said, "Yeah, I told this flight instructor or somebody that, when this book comes out, I am going to hand you a free book. That will be the best day of my life when it finally comes out," or something like that. Because he had to hear me for the year and a half or whatever it took me to write it, and he was with me and he was supportive, but I didn't know how much it was weighing on him. It can be a daunting task, I suppose. Anytime somebody's trying to accomplish something and they're having to work so hard to do it, it can be fatiguing for everybody that's around.
Absolutely.
And so it's a celebration, not just for the person that achieves it, but for everybody that gets to say, yes, you crossed the finish line, yay.
Yeah. That's awesome. I'm glad that you had him and so many other people too, because that's so important. Sometimes people don't realize how much emotional energy sometimes it takes to put yourself out there and to put yourself into art, into creativity.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Any kind of creativity. It doesn't matter. Or even just business. There's people that don't believe in themselves to go for, that promotion. Why not? Because they don't want to not get the job. They don't want to fail or whatever. And they need those champions too, to help them through believing that they may as well give it a shot. That the worst that can happen is they say no or whatever. I guess that's the first rule of sales, is to get used to hearing no or whatever.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Well, and I also like what you said earlier along the lines of, I deserve to be here. I have every right to be in this space and to create this way, because I think so often that is an inner mantra that people, not unconsciously tell themselves is, I don't deserve to be here. Other people there's other better people. And it's, no, like, if this is what you want to do, this is your life.
Right.
Do it.
Yes. Yeah. And I feel like authors often discuss too what their purpose was in writing. I don't know. I'm sure there's authors who truly don't care when they first start out if they have a bestseller, but everybody probably dreams that they might have this instantaneous success. But I think that it's okay to get in touch with the core reasons that you write. And writing, if I'm in, I don't know, maybe I am in my zone of genius when I write. Who knows? Because I do feel like hours can pass and I can still be working this blog or whatever it is, reworking this chapter, reworking this blog, and time can pass and I really don't track it. I feel, if anything, I have to stand up and walk away from it because my body's been sitting too long, not because I'm tired of it or bored with it or anything like that. So I have a right to be doing it.
Yeah.
Maybe it's not going to be my retirement, but it's still something that brings me joy. And I think joy is something I've tried to let myself feel too for a lot of years, to just let myself spend time in the things I find joy in instead of being the worker bee. So.
Are you a person who feels like they're able to stay present?
Ooh, is anybody? I don't know that person. Yeah, I've read The Power of Now. I've read those books, and I can bring myself back. And I think if I spend time in citing gratitude for what I'm grateful for right now, that helps me. And I'm not, I'm a ruminator though. That's what happens in the middle of the night. I think about what I should have said, what I could have done, that type of thing. And, that's just the past. And I don't have as much anxiety about the future. I probably spend more time, thinking, what I should have done or whatever. So, now is always a work in progress. And I don't think I'm not, I know people who are worse than me. I guess I could say that. And so there's that. I can, I have to remind myself. I read my yogi tea mantras, that say, positive things to me, that keep me kind of present. And I am reading a book right now by a yoga life coach, yoga instructor. And it's called A Year in Balance. So every day you read this passage. It's a quote by somebody, then it's a paragraph by her, and then there's a prompt question. And it really brings you into what it is today that you want to focus on. And I don't read it every single day, but I bet I read it 5 out of 7 days. And even if for that 15 minutes that I'm pondering that, I'm very present. And that's a really good book.
15 minutes is pretty good. I asked that question because it does seem, all of this, it goes hand in hand with, mindfulness.
Very good. Very true.
And being aware, like we were saying earlier, like catching yourself when that thought, your core belief about yourself darts through your mind and catching it. It's so important. So, and then just coming back to the book real quick, I wanted to ask, is there anything else you wanted to touch on about it that we haven't hit just yet?
I think one of the biggest things for me was, knowing that I can sabotage myself and to remove myself from that sabotager and talk to that sabotager. And I thought that was really very useful, and to recognize that would probably be one of the big takeaways that I think people could benefit from. But it's an easy book to read, and that's the thing. I have things in the margins, I have dog-eared pages, I have tabbed pages, so I don't have to reread the whole thing, but it's a very easy book. He was a psychologist, and it's just very practical. easy read and nothing you have to read quickly even.
Yeah, definitely. It's not a long one. I
No.
feel like it's very conversational, lots of like anecdotes about
Right.
people he knows who
Yes.
who saw this, or people he worked with, etc.
Yeah. It's just over 200 pages. Really. So it's a pretty short book. And then, if I had a companion book to put with it, there's another one called Biology of Belief. And it's by Bruce Lipton, and it's a very more science-based,
Okay.
but also a pretty easy read, since I'm not a science background person at all. But he also gets into the whole concept of somehow, whether we're told or whether we pick it up for whatever reason, these stories that we tell ourselves when we're little that we carry into adulthood can really have long-term effect, and that we have to recognize that that's almost part of our biology, and because it's become our biology, and that we have to work very consciously to move past some of those behaviors, those beliefs. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And I did want to give you, let's talk a little bit more about the nickel loop. Anything you want to share from that, or even Whispers for Tara, or what else you're working on right now?
Right now I am blogging a lot.
Okay.
I want to sit down and start writing. I think I want to write another novel. After I released the nickel loop, I was like, I'm tired. I need to, and there was all the marketing, that type of thing, and it's still going on, but
Yeah.
I really think I do have maybe one more in me. I can't shoot them out the way so many people do that I'm so impressed with, but I'm blogging a lot. My last blog was what the apocalypse looks like in my world.
Okay.
Because I blog about very random things. So.
Okay.
But the nickel loop, I think we're having this discussion. Who are your readers? And, what age are they? Are they male or female? And I'm like, I don't think those are the right questions for the nickel loop. To me, the nickel loop is, if you like time travel, you definitely will enjoy this book. And if you romance even a little bit, I think you'll enjoy it. In the historical fiction, I really, really enjoyed digging into what Colorado was like, America was like in the 1930s, but definitely digging into what Glenwood Springs, which is a seemingly rural town at the time, but was a hub for the area. I was surprised by all the things that there were in the 1930s, things that were available in this little mountain town. But I feel like people that are compelled and really, really love the nickel loop are people that, yes, they like all those premises, but they also like dreams and kind of the mystical, mysterious things that connect people. There's a character in it, Edmund, that's my favorite, and I've had a couple other people only that say that he's their favorite, but he's a psychic. And he's a very, kind of quiet spoken, carries a secret, but they meet him in 1938 and he helps them discover how they can travel back to their own times. But in the meantime, he knows things about them, that particularly about Nicholas, because Nicholas came from an earlier time, and this is 1938, and he knows things about Nicholas. He feels things, and then discovers that they're true. And so that aspect of that kind of metaphysical mystery piece is something that was in Whispers for Tara. Yeah, trees talk, so yeah. There's magical realism, and I really love that aspect. So if any of the listeners love kind of magical realism, they'll like the nickel loop.
They'll like the nickel loop. Oh, wonderful. Nancy, thank you so much for being with me here tonight. This was so lovely chatting. It's cold there. It's cold here. I don't know how it is in Michigan, but every day I drive home and I'm seeing the sun a little bit brighter. And it is just literally warms me and my heart.
Yes. It lifts the mood for sure when you see it. So. And it's staying lighter later. It's like 6 p.m. instead of 5:15. Yeah, it's great.
Yeah, so I'm loving it. Well, thank you so much for joining me tonight.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, and enjoy the rest of your evening.
Thank you.
Yeah, bye. Thank you for spending some time with me and my guest for an episode of Drinks in the Library. For more information about the show, you can find us on Instagram at Drinks in the Library, on the World Wide Web, drinksinthelibrary.com, or shoot me an email at drinkspod@gmail.com. Until next time, cheers.